Hi everybody, I hope that you're all doing well. Welcome to today's true crime video. Today's case is one that I would bet the majority of you have at least heard of, if not actually know in depth the details of the case. I usually don't like to cover cases that I know many creators have already covered, both ASMR and non-ASMR channels. But the reason I chose the JonBenét Ramsey case is because someone requested I do like a Christmas themed true crime, kind of like I do around Halloween, which is a weird combination, Christmas and true crime. I agree. But I was like, for the heck of it, let me look up some true crime cases that happened on or around Christmas, and this was one of the cases that came up. And surprisingly, although I have not watched, but seen so many YouTube videos about this case, I never actually watched one, and I never really read about the case. I knew the general idea, but I didn't know the details, and so I read through an article, and I was just like, I want to talk about this case. So I think every creator brings something different to the table, even when covering the same things. So that was my thought process behind that. So hopefully you don't mind if you have seen videos about this case before. But that's the case we're going to be talking about today. I will put a warning out right now that although yes, all true crime videos can be triggering in some way, this one especially, because it is about a child. It is about the mishandling and the death of a child. So if you think that that will be too triggering for you or will upset you, I totally understand. It upset me as well doing the research. So this video may not be for you, and that's okay. So just click off now if you think that that is not going to be okay for you. So I am going to go through my notes. I have my phone here. All my notes. I have a lot of notes. I think like 4.5 pages or something. So I'm just going to get started because I don't want to be here forever. The sun is peeking in and out right now, as you can see, so the lighting is a little not my favorite, but pretty soon it's going to keep going up and over the house, and pretty soon I think we won't have that problem. So maybe by the end of the video it will kind of have moved already, but okay. So we are taking it back to December of 1996 to set the stage for the case of JonBenét Ramsey. So JonBenét Ramsey was a beautiful 6-year-old little girl who was found dead in her parents' home on December 26th, 1996, the day after Christmas. And she was found in her parents' home in Boulder, Colorado. That's where they lived. So a little bit of background on her and her family. So she was born on August 6th, 1990. She was born in Atlanta, Georgia. Her father's name was JonBenét Ramsey. He was 53 years old when she died, and her mother's name was Patricia. She went by Patsy Ramsey, who was 40 years old when her daughter was found dead. She also had a brother. His name was Burke, and he was 9 years older than her. She had older siblings, which we will get to in a second. They were her half siblings, but that was her immediate family, the 4 of them. So she was enrolled in kindergarten already in Colorado at High Peaks Elementary School. Her father was Ramsey, so it was her father's name and her mother's name kind of put together. They moved to Boulder because that is where John's company's headquarters was located, and so that's where he moved his family. Patricia, Patsy, call her Patsy, was a former beauty queen. She was involved in many pageants in her life, and she was very much about that lifestyle and enrolled JonBenét, her daughter, in a bunch of pageants, even though she was, so young. But JonBenét, again, was a beautiful girl, so she actually won many titles, and she won the titles of America's Royal Miss, Little Miss Charlevoix, I think you would pronounce that as, Colorado State All-Star Kids Cover Girl, and the National Tiny Miss Beauty. The names they come up with. And after JonBenét's death, it was kind of reported more, it was brought to light more that Patsy, just wanted to enroll her in all these things, and she had typical pageant mom behavior, which when I hear that, I think like dance moms, those moms that kind of live vicariously through their children. That happens a lot in the dance world, and I guess the pageant world too. So I'm sure you can kind of gather what kind of behavior that is or was. So that's a little bit of background on the family. So now let's talk about what actually happened on December 26th. So I want you to listen to everything carefully, and if you're still awake at the end of this video, then let me know your thoughts down below. So on December 26th, Patsy noticed that her daughter JonBenét had been missing. She hadn't seen her for a while, and this was after she found a 2.5-page handwritten ransom note for her child on her kitchen stairwell. They had like a little stairwell that went into their kitchen in their home. They found this ransom note, and the note demanded $118,000, which in today's world would be equivalent to around $200,000. And it was a ransom note for her daughter. If you don't know what a ransom note is, I'm sure most of you do. If you don't, it's a note demanding money to get someone back in return. And later, this is just a note that her father told police later on. He noticed that the amount that they were asking for was nearly identical to the Christmas bonus he had gotten the year before from work. So he told police, this has got to be somebody that, has that information about me. So, like, maybe somebody that we know. And, police looked into his coworkers, didn't really come up with anything. They also considered the fact that that amount may be related to like a Bible verse, so they looked into Psalm 118. They consulted with a bunch of religious sources to determine, possible relevance there, and nothing really came of it. Now, the FBI got involved in this case, and they told police that the note was just not normal. It wasn't anything that they have seen in other ransom notes. They said it was too long. The wording was just off. There were a bunch of too many exclamation marks, things like that, initialisms, like everything was broke down into initials, like abbreviations, and they just said it was weird. It wasn't normal. So the police and the FBI, mostly the police from the beginning were very set on the fact that JonBenét's parents were incredibly suspect. So the police believed right away that the note had been staged. It had no fingerprints on it except for JonBenét's mother's fingerprints and the authorities who handled the evidence. So right away, that was a gigantic red flag to them. It was also written with a pen and on a notepad from the Ramsey residence. So that would mean that they would have had to have taken the time to stop in the family's house and write the note really quick rather than come with a note already prepared. What else? According to a CBI report, there were indications that the note was actually written by Patsy. But in the end, they just couldn't find enough evidence to 100% lock her into an actual suspect. They couldn't make that concrete, that conclusion. Now, a board-certified forensic pathologist named Michael Baden was brought in on the case, and he said in his 60 years of experience doing what he did, he never saw a ransom note like it. And he did not believe that the note was written by a random stranger who broke into their house and took their kid. 6 handwriting experts were consulted, however, and the federal court ruled that it was highly unlikely that Patsy or any family member wrote the note. So, a lot of different opinions about what was right and what was actually happening and who did it. And this case was a mess. It was a mess, as we will dive into a little bit more. So keep in mind at this point we have a ransom note and a missing child. Now, that actual night, December 26th, here's what happened. The only people known to have been in that house were the 4 immediate family members, JonBenét, her 2 parents, and her brother. The note was very specific about not contacting the police or friends or family. However, Patsy did call the police at 5:52 a.m. She also immediately after called her family and friends. 3 minutes later, very quickly, police arrived at their home to see what was going on and to search the house. Now, they did a whole search of the entire property, and there was no sign of forced entry. Did not look like anyone had broken in, nothing like that. Officer Rick French was one of the officers there. He went down to search the basement of the family's home. That's the area that he was assigned to go look at. And when he went down to the basement, he came to a door that was secured shut by a wooden latch. And now he paused in front of it for a second, looked at it, and then kept on walking, and it never opened the door. He later said he was looking for an exit route that a kidnapper could have used, so because the door was latched from the outside, he didn't think anything of it, which even though you're supposed to be doing a search of the whole home, but you skip a place, but that was his mentality. He skipped the door. I will tell you right now that later on, JonBenét was found right behind that door. But we'll get there. So, in this case, he passes the door. Officers are still doing a whole sweep of the house, and while this is all going on, John, the father, starts trying to make arrangements to see if he can collect that ransom money to, get his kid back. A forensics team then came over to the house. Now, initially, the forensics team thought that she had been kidnapped. But now, this is where things and the case start to get real messy. The only room that was closed off in the house so that evidence wasn't disturbed was her room, JonBenét's room. The rest of the house was up for grabs. People walked in and out, people touched things. And so there was no precaution to preserve the evidence for the rest of the house. And while this whole investigation is going on, that early morning, the whole next day, friends and family were showing up to the house to, offer their support. They were helping the family clean. They cleaned off surfaces in the kitchen, just touching everything. And so the evidence was just down the toilet. Detectives instructions from the kidnapper, maybe another note or something like that. Nothing ever came. So, 1 p.m. the next day, a detective by the name of 𝓢𝓸𝓬𝓲𝓪, I believe, asked John, the father, and his family friend, Fleet White, to do another search of the house, and she said, just go around your house and tell me if anything looks amiss, anything looks out of place, anything like that. So immediately they said okay, and they started their search in the basement. Now John went to that same door that was latched from the outside, opened it, and found JonBenét's lifeless body. So now this is where it's going to start to get even more disturbing, so again, proceed with caution. JonBenét was on the floor. Her mouth was covered in duct tape. She had a nylon cord around her wrists and her neck, and she was covered in a white blanket. And John found her, picked her up, and brought her upstairs, further contaminating any evidence, because he touched her cloth that she had over her, touched her, moved her body, so that did not help things. Each family member at this point had to provide handwriting, blood, and hair samples to the police. John and Patsy were interviewed for 2 hours together, and then Burke, even though he was 9 years old, he was also interviewed. So the autopsy concluded that JonBenét had been killed by strangulation and a skull fracture. Not sure which one came first, but those were the causes of death. Now, there was no evidence of rape. However, they could not fully rule out sexual assault. There was no semen found, but there was evidence to suggest that she may have been injured down there. And at the time, the pathologist who did the autopsy recorded that it seemed that her area down there had been wiped with a cloth, to get rid of evidence. And the death was obviously ruled a homicide. So sad. So, we're going to start to get into more evidence now. So, the cord around her neck, along with the handle of a paintbrush, was used they tied it around the paintbrush handle and then tied it around her neck. Now, part of the bristle at the end of the paintbrush was also found in a tub of Patsy's art supplies. However, the bottom half of the brush, because it was broken into pieces, the bottom half of the brush was never found anywhere in the house after that. The autopsy also revealed that JonBenét had probably eaten some sort of fruit prior to her death, what looked like pineapple. Now, crime scene photos were obviously taken the day that all the authorities were there, and photos of the kitchen revealed that there was a bowl of pineapple on the kitchen table with a spoon in it. Neither John nor Patsy remembered, 1, putting the bowl on the table, and 2, feeding it to JonBenét. Police reported that Burke's fingerprints, though, were on the bowl, which is weird because the parents said that Burke slept through the entire night and only woke up when police arrived. So you're seeing right away that things are just not making sense here. Now, this whole investigation went on for years and years and years. It's still ongoing. I don't believe at this point it's closed. It's still ongoing. So fast forward a couple years, December 2003, forensics teams got enough material finally from a mixed blood sample found on JonBenét's underwear to get a DNA profile. Now, they said it belonged to an unknown male and excluded DNA from each family member. However, though, a database that the FBI uses that contains 1.6 million DNA profiles was used, and the sample did not match a single profile in the DNA database. So that tells me right there, my opinion, and other people have said the same, that the evidence was so badly disturbed that the DNA sample probably wasn't even right. Later, additional traces of male DNA were found on the cord and paintbrush. And now, again, it was just so messy. There were also 6 separate DNA samples belonging to unknown individuals that were found after testing. The FBI profilers believed that the DNA, because it was found on several surfaces in the house, that same DNA, they said that it belonged to the killer, but that there wasn't enough evidence to show whether it was a stranger or not. Makes me crazy. If this happened today, I don't think it would have been the same outcome. But okay, so like I said before, initially police were like, the parents did it, like they just needed enough information to make it concrete. But that was what the police believed the whole time, that the parents did it. But at the same time, by October 1997, almost a year later, they had 1,600 people as suspects. And again, that was due to so many errors that took place: loss of evidence, contamination of evidence, lack of experienced staff that were assigned to the case, and delayed informal interviews with the parents. You had the DA's office, who were like, no, it was a stranger. The police department, who said, no, it's the parents. Just nobody agreed. In September 1998, a grand jury decided that the Ramseys should be charged, that the parents should be charged with placing the child at risk in a way that led to her death, and with obstructing an investigation of murder, which I would agree, but whatever. The district attorney did not prosecute them in the end, and the Ramseys were actually publicly exonerated in 2008. In 2010, the case was reopened, so at one point it was closed. They reopened it in 2010. New interviews were conducted, and new DNA technology was used to basically try again. Again, no conclusions were made, no new hypotheses were made. And as of 2016, it was still an ongoing homicide case. So no one was ever found. So now let's go into some theories that people have. So the majority of people agree with the family member theory, that it was a family member that killed her. And the FBI even said that statistically it's a 12-to-1 probability that a family member or a caregiver does it in a case such as this one. There was no evidence of forced entry, like I said, but there was evidence and things that pointed to the fact that it was a staged murder, or a staged crime scene, I should say. The family was not always cooperative in the investigation, which, hello, red flag to me right there. Burke was interviewed twice, the little boy, but he was so young and no concerns were ever raised about him. And the thing that I thought was so weird, the parents agreed to do an interview separate from each other. It took them 4 months after their daughter's body was found to agree to do separate interviews. Makes me crazy. There's another short little theory, the fruit theory. I named it the fruit theory. No one calls it the fruit theory, but that's what I called it in my notes. There's a theory that some people have that Burke, the little boy, may have hit his sister over the head in a way that injured her really badly because she stole some of his pineapple. And then the parents came up with the ransom though he was 9 years old, but that's a theory. Probably not too many people think that, but some do. And then there's the intruder theory. There was an unidentified boot mark in the basement where JonBenét was found. They never identified who it could be, but you know, it didn't match the family members, so that's a point. You know, people in the area were looked into. There was a neighbor who played Santa for the kids a couple times. He was interviewed as a suspect. A former housekeeper, same thing. There were also 2 cracked windows in the house that let cords for the outside Christmas lights to be able to be plugged in. So people think, well, hello, there were windows open, so somebody could have just opened it and gone in. But the problem with that theory is that a lot of people rule it out because that same window, or those windows that were cracked, had an intact cobweb on it, that if someone had come through the window, it would have been broken and disturbed. So people are like, that's not valid. You know, police also looked into burglars in the area, sex offenders, never came to any conclusions. There was one lady who I read, I didn't write this down, but she wrongfully confessed. She was like, yeah, I did it, I killed JonBenét, and she was like living somewhere else in the country, and there was no evidence that linked her anywhere near the crime scene at all. And so that was dismissed. So I don't know, well, I do know what I think. I just think there are so many red flags that point to the parents, but at this point, the only people that know what really happened are the parents, the killer, if it was somebody else, and God. And that's literally it, and I don't know if we will ever find out what happened to this poor little girl. But it's such a tragic case. She was such a beautiful girl, and I hope that we find out one day, but who knows. So that is going to be it for today's video. I hope that you guys enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts down below, and I will see you in my next video.